Interconnections and liberation of souls. During interconnections, we always ask souls, for example, why they decided to invade a body. Why specifically this body? What was their motive and how are they now influencing it? A soul, a departed spirit, doesn't always head to the light, doesn't always go on. And just as they say in sacred books or great sacred stories from various cultures, when souls decide to leave a body, they follow the light, emerge, and move towards the heavens. We can say, Rodri, that in our experience this generally doesn't happen. And this is the scourge that causes people to suffer what we can call a spiritual illness. That's to say, when a soul becomes lost, doesn't know which way to go because of its attachment to this existence, because of frustrations in its life, at some point, it decides to invade another body. Sometimes they're conscious of it happening. They want to invade it, and sometimes they're not. It just acts like a magnet that attracts them. Have you come across this? Yes, sometimes they forget themselves. They forget their name. They've been in this new body for so long, it's like they've merged into the other person, and even forgotten their own name, their old name. You have to help them remember, and as you do, they start to remember more and more about their existence and why they entered this body. Souls that inhabit bodies always create a distortion, a disturbance, and always lower the energy of that body. They feed off the energy and they influence the body with their own life experience, with how they previously lived and how they were at the moment of their death. These are all elements that radiate from and are reflected in the invaded body. And just by removing these souls, we can find a solution, a restoration or a cure from the patient's physical body, their behavior or their emotional well-being. I'll give you an example or an analogy that I like to say to people. An analogy with a car. I own a car, the car is in my name, and I am the legal owner. So, I'm at the wheel of my car driving it. These energies of other souls invade and take hold of me in moments of weakness. For example, a fight, a death, an accident, etc. Moments of weakness that every person has. And during these moments of weakness, it's like I abandon the wheel and invading souls take over. They start to drive, to take control in moments of weakness. An extreme example is when people are walking down the street completely lost, talking to themselves and answering, having a conversation by themselves. Those people are in the back seat of the car, not out of the car, but in the rear passenger seat. They can't control their own lives, and there are others who fight for the driver's seat, and neither they nor the other person has control. This topic is very important because we help these lost, suffering souls to decide to find a new path along the lines of what we suggest to them. That is, to decide to leave these bodies and complete the cycle of this part of their existence and enter another level. So, at some point, through our encouragement, the soul decides to leave this body and is then guided by other forces to another level, and the person later awakens from the trance. They wake up and just imagine they've never experienced anything like this and they're in complete shock and very emotional. Liberated. Completely liberated. Their first sensations are of liberation, of relief, of calmness. If they had some symptom within their body, in general, that symptom is dissolved, relieved almost immediately. Yes, that happened in a case of mine. I remember one case when a girl came to the session and said to me, "Look, I don't believe in anything, Rodri. I don't believe any of this, but okay, I have depression. I've had it for 30 years. Since I was 12, I've been depressed. And now I'm 42 and I can't get out of this depression. So I've come here, okay, let's give it a go." With her in the trance, I invoke the soul that was generating all of the depression within her, a woman, and I ask her what is her relationship with the patient. And she says, look, I'm Marta. I don't remember her name. And she says that she was the mother of the patient's best friend when she was 11 years old, and that the mother had committed suicide and then later regretted it, and in order to be near her daughter, she went inside this girl, the daughter's best friend, to look after her. So she had good intentions with the invasion. It's good to clarify that it isn't always done with bad intentions. Yes, of course, not always. An invasion is simply an invasion. There are good intentions and bad intentions, and hers was to be near to the girl. But what happened? When the soul attached itself, as I always say, the good always comes with the bad. With the soul came, regardless of the best intentions, with all of her conflict, her depression, her suicidal instincts, all of her negative thoughts. When a soul goes into a body, it comes with its backup, let's say, of its history and emotions. Exactly. Experiences and pain, and in general these are usually radiated through the body it inhabits. Yes, the body is influenced by those thoughts. And there are varying amounts of influence, aren't there? Yes, we can find in many cases that there's a wide range of influence, from influencing the body to gestures, habits, facial expressions and mannerisms, habits, yes. And sometimes invasions are simply asymptomatic. There are no symptoms for a long time, and then at some point they are activated. So we say to the people who are going to hear and see these videos that we are not alone in this world, and that the majority of people are influenced in some way by other souls, by other beings. In general, these influences are invading their body without them even knowing. However, many of them have signs, and it is very important to talk to them about these too. If they feel some sign, something strange or different, something unusual for them, or that can cause a radical behavior change or a symptom. Sometimes they could be under the influence of a spiritual invasion. Our task then is to show as many people as possible that many of their illnesses, problems and difficulties don't originate in this life, nor in their psychology, nor in something organic that they are suffering from, but actually have a spiritual cause, and in particular are rooted in a spiritual invasion that is invisible to them. And it's thanks to the treatments that the person also finds himself in the spiritual world, because it gives that person the opportunity to be in contact with the world that they previously didn't realize existed. So perhaps all of this suffering, these invasions, are the key to a world of spiritual evolution, a way of finding new meaning in our lives. Sometimes I ask myself whether souls can also re-enter a person. Yes, it's possible. It's possible that they re-enter. When we treat the patient, we have certain protocols that are taught when learning metahypnosis, which allow us in some way to create a series of seals and pacts so that this soul won't be invasive, neither in this life nor in future lives. But there are entities, souls, that go into what we call rebellion. That's to say, we persuade them to leave the body, they agree to leave. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, but they agree to leave and they do. Well, we believe they have. But when we see the patient again in another session, it turns out that this soul has returned and is within the body once more. That's to say, we persuade them to leave the body. They agree to leave. Sometimes it's a bit difficult, but they agree to leave and they do. Well, we believe they have. But when we see the patient again in another session, it turns out that this soul has returned and is in the body once more. It's inside them, yes. And many of them say, I don't want to leave, or I left and I came back again. Violating the protocols, how do they manage to do that? Yes, there are souls that have a more powerful influence over the invaded person. Exactly, these are what are called rebellious souls. They enter into rebellion. They rebel against pacts, against their promises, and against the spiritual agreement that we've proposed entering into. And it's then that we have to be a bit firmer in the process of expulsion. Now, why does a person who has lived a decent life in this existence suffer from a spiritual invasion? There are lots of people who say, but I'm a good person, why did this happen to me? And then we have to explain that we haven't only existed in this life. Our souls have already been in this world for a long time, for lots of different lives. And that's what we call the wheel of life and death, isn't it? The wheel of reincarnation. Would you like to tell us something about that? I remember a case with a girl who had problems with domestic violence. She was abusing her partners. It was mostly verbal abuse, also sexual conflict, and it was also like she was aggressive with her partners. She'd even thrown many of them out. Once she was in a trance, I invoked the soul that generated all of this conflict, and the soul of a man manifests and gives me his name. And I ask him what his relationship with the girl was, and he tells me that they had been lovers in a previous life, and that he had died in her arms, in the arms of the woman. And during a war, a century ago in Spain, he gave me the details. He tells me that they had sworn eternal love in that life. So he can't stand her being with any other man, and it was him who was boycotting the relationships, ruining all of her relationships. It was him who was getting into her head and making her angry with her partners and unable to enjoy sex with them. That's a classic, isn't it? A classic example of what appears during the treatment, during interconnections. There are many women with problems with love and relationships, with a specific partner or throughout their whole lives. And they try to deal with them with various therapies, psychological, psychiatric, and other therapies, but they don't get any results. And it's here that, with interconnections, we can find a deeper cause, such as that spiritual trauma, can't we? For example, in that case with the ex-husband who decided through passion, desire, and possessiveness to come and invade her in this life and disrupt it, and be capable of influencing her to the extent of affecting any kind of intimacy or relationship. Yes. In another very similar case, there was a girl who had that same difficulty with having pleasure in her personal life, that her contact with men seemed to be blocked. And when we start to look into the interconnections from which this difficulty originated, a man manifests. And this man says, I am this woman's father, but her father from a previous life. And I say, okay, and what are you doing inside this body? Look, I'm here to take care of her. I came here to protect her. Why? Because in the other life, someone, a king, kidnapped her, took her away and left me without my daughter. I suffered terribly, and so when I died, I decided to search for her soul, and stay inside her so that no other man would be able to take her away. So the trauma of her father in another life, his pain and his obsession were so strong that it even gave his soul the motive to follow his daughter through to this incarnation and condition her, for example, in this case, in her relations with men. Such are the dramas of souls, and what they can cause is something very, very strong, very deeply rooted. And the idea is to show to the people watching these videos that this exists, that it can contribute to a lot of the difficulties and suffering that human beings face in various forms. One way being physically, that's to say, we see souls influencing the physical body, for example, provoking an illness. Oh, I'm going to tell you about a very interesting case. A woman came to us with cancer, a tumor in the left breast. She had the tumor 7 years before. They treated it and she got better, but it had now returned. So someone refers her to me, she tells me her story about her illness and the treatment with chemotherapy, etc., etc.
que dentro del tratamiento médico ya sabemos que es quimioterapia, etcétera, etcétera.
So I say, okay, let's see what interconnections can tell us about what is happening to you. And I ask her, before you had this symptom, did anything strange happen in your life? Did you feel anything out of the ordinary? And she says, look, before this, something did happen, something that struck me. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I thought that someone was knocking on the window and trying to catch my attention, so I got up, opened the window, but there was no one there, so I closed it again. Another night, at 3 in the morning, there's a knocking at the window again. I get up and there's no one. And I ask her, was it just you who heard this? And she tells me, yes, because my husband was sleeping deeply and didn't hear anything at all. After a few days of regularly hearing these sounds, she opened the window and felt a chill go through her body and make all of her hair stand on end. I say, okay, let's investigate that. The person enters into a trance, into a very deep process within the trance to take her to the interconnection. Because to make the interconnection, she has to be in an especially deep trance. So we invoke the energy that caused this disturbance, and I ask, who are you? What are you doing inside this body? And it tells me, I'm the woman who knocked on the window all of those nights. I ask, and what is it that made you come to this woman? They say, I had an accident and died close to where this woman lives, and I was in a state, desperately searching for the light, and as I saw that she had a light, it was like she was illuminated with happiness. I decided to enter her life. And I ask, what is it that you cause within her? She caused her illness because she herself had breast cancer before dying in the accident. That's to say that, in general, we find that when a soul enters the body and the body has a specific illness, that they had died with that illness, that same energy can radiate within the person's body and provoke the symptom. Yes, I had a similar case. A woman who came to me with irritable bowel syndrome. And since when have you had this? I ask her. Since my husband died. And what did he die of? Of colon cancer. So he had caused the invasion. Her husband was inside her because, this is very common, he didn't want her to be with anyone else. So the husband had generated a less serious version of the same symptom with his invasion. And also there was a very interesting case with someone with psoriasis. A very pretty girl came to a consultation with psoriasis from her neck to her feet, as well as a little on her head. Her whole body had been covered in psoriasis for years, nearly her entire life. Using the psychosomatic diagnosis in general is a lack of paternal protection. I start to analyze her history, and apparently her father was the best dad in the world. My dad is the best dad in the world. And your dad's dad? He died when my father was 5 years old. This is a clue to where to start our investigation into this lack of paternal protection. But she hadn't felt this. She didn't feel any conflict regarding any lack of paternal protection. And once she's in the trance, a soul manifests when I invoke the soul that is causing all of this on her skin. The soul that manifests turns out to be a girl who had been murdered by her own father. She was full of hate and intending to get revenge on him. I'm not leaving this body, not until I've had revenge on my father. I'm going to kill him. This is a clue to where to start our investigation into this lack of paternal protection. But she hadn't felt this. She didn't feel any conflict regarding any lack of paternal protection. And once she's in the trance, a soul manifests when I invoke the soul that is causing all of this on her skin. This is a fundamental part of invasion that we cover in the chapter Spirit, Vengeful Souls, a scourge. Why does this happen? I'm going to tell you about the case of a woman who came to the consultation with very severe muscular dystrophy. She practically couldn't talk already. She was in a wheelchair. Her symptoms were very, very serious. And with the medicines and traditional therapeutic measures, we can see what this poor woman is suffering. But from the perspective of interconnections and karma, we have another transcendent insight into why things happen. We believe that nothing happens by coincidence, and when we begin to investigate this case, the patient goes into trance and a very, very angry soul manifests saying, "I'm here because I came to destroy this woman. I'm going to destroy her and I'm not going to stop until she's destroyed." And I ask the soul, "But why are you here? What has this soul of the patient ever done to you?" And they say that in another life, they had been executed for treason. And this soul, once it had realized what had happened with the execution, decided to get revenge by entering the patient's body and creating a series of disturbances in such a way as to produce such a serious illness that it was practically impossible for traditional medicine to cure. Which is to say that at times we work to expel the soul, but the physical deterioration that the soul had caused was so great, yes, that there's no time. Yes, so symptomatic that there's no time. Yes, it's possible that the person finds peace and liberation by no longer having the soul inside them, but there's still what we call a spiritual debt, a debt between these two souls. Karmic debt from past lives. Yes, sometimes there are cases where we help people. They are personally and spiritually liberated, even physically. Sometimes they are completely liberated, and in some cases the liberation is only partial, because we see that the person's karma and the debt between the two souls is so great that it isn't possible to undo it. What would be our function, Rodrigo, in relation to the therapy that we execute within Metahipnosis in Interconnections? We enter into and we influence the karma. We're also part of this liberation from karma. I believe that we make a sort of peace between the souls. We get them to talk, to have a dialogue, we explain things to them, we make them recognize themselves, the invaded and invasive soul, within their situation, and that if they continue this war with each other, they are only going to harm themselves. We explain to them about karma and reincarnation, and that if they make peace with each other, they can find their own peace.
Solamente se perjudican ellas mismas, entrar en pacificación, explicarles que el karma, explicarles la reencarnación, explicarles cómo pueden encontrar su paz.
Yes, because these are lost souls, souls that ignore the path towards evolution. They lose the meaning of their lives, and our mission is to inform them of the meaning of their new lives and why it's bad, why it's not good to enter into and invade someone else's body. Maybe volunteering, for example, an intention or purpose to help them. For example, there are parents who die and suffer a lot for having to leave their family. They don't want to, and they decide out of love for their family and attachment to the earth to stay in this dimension, to stay in this world. And they don't just manage to stay within bodies, but we can also find their souls affecting the surroundings, houses, places where the family lived. Many of them, haven't you found this, don't even realize they've died. Yes.
En los ambientes donde se maneja la familia. En general se instalan en las casas, en los lugares donde vivieron. A veces muchos de ellos, ¿no te ha pasado que no se dieron cuenta que han muerto?
Sí.
No tomaron conciencia de que murieron. Voy a contarte un caso de...
I'm going to tell you about the case of a woman who came with a lot of illnesses. She came with a list of more than 15 illnesses. One of these was chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, and tobacco addiction. So I asked her when her addiction to tobacco started, And she says, just after my father's death. The wake finished and I began having a strong desire to smoke. I'd never smoked in my life, but after the death of my dad, I started smoking, and I smoked a lot. And I ask her, was your father a smoker? And she tells me, yes, and on top of that, I smoke the same make of cigarettes as my dad. Oh, that's very interesting. We know that a concealed invasion by the father's soul could be behind this. It's a classic example. The patient enters into trance and it's as we expect. The woman's father manifests. Changing my tone of voice, adopting a sharper tone, I ask him, what are you doing here? And he says, I have to be here. I can't leave my daughter alone because she's incapable of looking after my interests. She isn't capable of looking after my lands, nor is she going to be capable of running my companies. If I'm not here, my businesses are going to go to ruin. That's the reason I have to be here, because my daughter is incapable of doing it. So the obsession and attachment of this soul led to the invasion. And I ask him, is it you that's making her smoke? Of course, it's me who smokes. I don't just make her smoke, I smoke through her body. That's to say that souls often use another body to enjoy life's pleasures. Yes, of course. And I also had a very interesting case of a woman with sexual conflict in her relationship. And she had her dead mother-in-law inside her body, her mother-in-law who had died many years before, who wanted to be here near her son, near the woman's partner. She wanted to be near, but not that near. She had good intentions in being near her son, but it was her who was blocking the couple's intimacy, as she didn't want to be close in that way. And another thing that I wanted to tell you was that we've seen many times that, depending on the power of influence they have, they can invade not only one person but the whole family. They can invade many more people according to the energetic power of emanation that the soul has.
Si no pueden invadir toda la familia, pueden invadir a muchísima más gente según el poder energético de emanación que tenga esa.
Why? Because the soul isn't something that is binary. It isn't like a body that is a physical unit and has limits. Yeah, it has limits. As the souls enter the unlimited world, the quantum world, they can fold and divide themselves so that the same soul can be in different bodies. For example, a father can be in the bodies of 2 or 3 of his daughters. Absolutely. So, Rodri, within the topic of spiritual invasions and interconnections, we also find that it isn't only the souls of the departed that can influence a person's life, don't we? Yes, in the same way that disincarnate souls influence us, we can also be influenced by the souls of living people, people who are still alive in this existence. It's very simple. It's the same kind of influence as that of a controlling partner, an obsessive person, the same influence that an extremely controlling, manipulative and possessive mother can have over her child. What does this obsession do? It can cause a part of its energy, apart from their soul, decide in its obsession to temporarily enter the object of it. And we find in Interconnections, in the search for what in the spiritual world is affecting the person's life, that it's often a living person who is influencing them. For example, living mothers who say that they are inside their son so he behaves in such and such a way, or he doesn't have a relationship with this or that woman. We come across all sorts.
Podemos encontrarnos de todo.
Cualquier cosa. Una chica
Anything
que
and
venía a consultar
everything,
también
yes.
por problemas de pareja.
Another girl came to a consultation with relationship problems. It turns out that she had her mother inside her, but completely, deeply inside her. And the mother starts insulting me through the girl in trance. Her living mother starts insulting me. This is my daughter, mine. I made her, she's mine, and I'm not leaving. And her conflict was that she didn't want her daughter to have a partner because, according According to her, the daughter belonged to her and had to take care of her. Incredible, isn't it? Completely obsessed. In fact, the girl had told me before the trance that every time she'd had a partner, her mother insulted her and threw all of her clothes over the balcony. Now you're going to leave me all on my own. And she threw everything over the balcony. And this essence we also removed, because it can't be in our life. Another soul can't inhabit ours. Yes, we are influenced by teachers, parents, by culture and society, but our body and soul should stay alone in this experience. But the majority of people we see aren't alone.
Pero vemos que la mayoría no nos encontramos solos.
Yes, I had another similar case with good intentions but causing a disruption, a disturbance, in a girl who said she was an alcoholic. And it turns out that when I invoke the soul that is inside of her, that is pushing her towards alcoholism, her grandfather appears. The girl takes on the gestures of an old man right to her face and hands and starts to laugh. Who are you? I am Francisco. And why are you here? It was the grandfather. Because this is my granddaughter. Because I love her and I'm looking after her. Ah, you're looking after her. And when did you go into her? Well, I went into her at the funeral, at my funeral. But why? Because she asked me to. Of course, I can imagine the child at the coffin saying, "Grandpa, don't leave me," that it had been the source of his love. Of course. That's why we have to be so careful to learn to accept someone's passing, to help the soul depart without attachments, accepting that the soul moves on and that we continue our lives in this world without them, remembering them, but also allowing their evolution. They should go on. And we explain that to the soul, and also that instead of helping the person, that they are actually harming them. I say to the grandfather, "Do you love your granddaughter?" "Yes, I love her with all my heart. She's the apple of my eye." "Ah, you love her so much that you're making her an alcoholic?" "Well, what happened is that I quite like a drink." Then he starts to realize the damage he's causing his granddaughter and decides to depart. He accepts and agrees to leave in a good way, and her alcoholism stopped in that session. It's already been 2 or 3 years and she's never come back. But how many souls can inhabit a body? What's the greatest number of souls we've found? We've had cases with more than 100 inhabiting someone. How can so many exist in one body? Well, often they're conscious of it. They talk between themselves of how to manipulate the body and to feed off it.
De cómo manipular el cuerpo, de cómo alimentarse.